From cyclones that rewrite coastlines to quakes that bend entire cities, each catastrophe begins the same way, a whisper in the deep, ignored by those too busy to listen. Let's have a look at the 12 levels of natural disasters one by one, from the tremor no one feels to the cataclysm that resets the planet's rhythm. Let's begin at level 1. Level 1, the anomaly phase. Every catastrophe begins quietly, a reading on a monitor, a ripple on calm water, a cloud turning against the wind. At first, nothing seems wrong, just fluctuations in numbers. Pressure drops by a few millibars. Temperature rises by a single degree. The soil hums with vibrations too faint to feel. But in nature, the smallest deviations are omens. In 2023, over 1.3 million earthquakes were recorded worldwide, yet 90% were weaker than a thunderclap. Weather satellites track 45,000 storm cells every day, but only 1 in 1,000 becomes a named cyclone. Disaster begins not with movement, but with pattern. Meteorologists call this the anomaly window, the moment when pressure, temperature, and geometry begin to drift from normal. At level 1, only machines are awake. Humans scroll past the warning signs. Nature exhales, and nobody notices. Every disaster starts as data before it becomes death. Level 2, when energy finds a host. Now, energy begins to organize. Deep underground, fault lines strain, rock pressing against rock with the patience of continents. A tectonic plate moves just a few centimeters a year, but each centimeter stores billions of joules of energy. That's the same energy a major city consumes in a day, locked silently beneath the crust. In the atmosphere, warm water feeds vapor feeds clouds, and clouds feed storms. A cyclone is born when sea temperatures cross 26.5 degrees Celsius for long enough, the ocean lending its fury to the air. In 1980, before Mount St. Helens erupted, over 10,000 mini-quakes rippled through the mountain in 3 months. The mountain was breathing, but no one recognized the pattern until it screamed. This is the stress line. Equilibrium lost, but not yet broken. At level 2, the disaster hasn't arrived. It's preparing an address. Level 3, containment fails. There's a moment when pressure meets permission, and everything changes. A fault ruptures. A volcano exhales. A thunderstorm organizes its eye. A hurricane spiral tightens like a fist. Containment is gone. The planet's stored energy rushes out faster than sound. When the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake struck beneath Sumatra, the seafloor jolted upward 15 meters in seconds. It released energy equivalent to 23,000 Hiroshima bombs, launching a tsunami that traveled 800 kilometers per hour, killing 230,000 people across 14 countries. In 2018, Indonesia's Anak Krakatoa volcano collapsed into the sea, triggering waves without warning. One moment, fireworks in the sky. The next, darkness on the coast. At level 3, nature stops hinting and starts moving. Numbers become bodies, and the air itself begins to scream. There's no rewind from here, only reaction. Level 4, when the system starts feeding itself. Once a disaster breaks free, it begins to multiply. Cyclones find their eye walls, vast walls of cloud rotating at 250 kilometers per hour, with wind speeds strong enough to strip paint from steel. Wildfires generate their own weather, plumes of heat spawning fire tornadoes that hurl embers kilometers ahead. Earthquakes ripple outwards, spawning tsunamis that outrun sound itself. The 2020 Atlantic hurricane season broke every record. 30 named storms, 13 hurricanes, and $10 billion disasters in one season. In Australia, 2019, wildfires burned over 186,000 square kilometers, producing smoke so thick it circled the planet twice and cooled global temperatures by 0.1 degrees Celsius. At level 4, nature stops reacting. It starts inventing. Every gust, every ember, every tremor feeds the next one. This is self-sustaining chaos, a feedback loop made of heat, pressure, and despair. Humans call it unstoppable. Earth calls it efficient. Level 5, the collapse. When infrastructure meets nature. At this level, disasters stop being natural. They become human. Roads crack open. Bridges buckle, power grids hum, then die. Hospitals flood, cell towers drown, lights vanish. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina tore into New Orleans. Winds at 280 kilometers per hour, storm surge over 6 meters high. When levees failed, 80% of the city went underwater. 1,800 people died. The rest watched their homes float past on live TV. In Turkey, 2023, twin earthquakes of 7.8 and 7.5 magnitude struck 9 hours apart. Entire districts folded in seconds. More than 160,000 buildings collapsed, proof that poor design kills faster than any fault line. At level 5, systems we built to protect us become part of the wreckage. Civilization is fragile, not because the planet is cruel, but because progress is heavy, and nature eventually asks for the bill. Level 6. When the aftermath becomes the environment, the storm ends, the wind quiets, the fires dim to embers, but the disaster hasn't stopped. It's just changed shape. Floodwaters linger, poisoning wells and spreading disease. Ash settles into rivers, blocking sunlight from plankton. Infrastructure lies shattered, and recovery crawls slower than decay. After Pakistan's floods in 2022, a third of the country was underwater. More than 33 million people were affected, and when the waters receded, they left behind stagnant pools, breeding 1.6 million new malaria cases within weeks. After Hurricane Maria, 2017, Puerto Rico's power grid remained crippled for 11 months. Hospitals ran on diesel fumes. Survivors rationed bottled water like medicine. This is level 6, where the disaster doesn't kill instantly, but lives rent-free in the ruins. Children grow up beside the same rivers that drowned their parents. Entire generations learn to farm in contaminated soil. And soon, memory itself becomes geography. At this level, disaster isn't measured in deaths, but in duration. It's not the noise, it's the silence after. Level 7. When the planet remembers what it's made of. Beneath every mountain is a memory of pressure, heat, and time waiting to exhale. Volcanoes aren't explosions. They're relief valves, the Earth's way of telling us it's still alive. For millions of years, magma rises from the mantle, pressurized by temperatures above 1,200 degrees Celsius and pressures 100,000 times greater than surface air. When that pressure escapes, it doesn't just destroy, it creates. Every continent exists because of volcanic breath. The Hawaiian Islands are stacked evidence, formed one by one as the Pacific plate drifted over a magma hotspot like a slow-motion candle drip. But when volcanoes overreach, the balance breaks. In 1815, Mount Tambora erupted in Indonesia, the largest eruption in recorded history. It ejected 160 cubic kilometers of ash into the atmosphere, darkening skies across the world. Temperatures dropped by nearly 1 degree Celsius, and 1816 became the year without a summer. Crops failed in Europe and China. Famine reshaped politics. The planet sneezed, and civilization caught the cold. In 1991, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines released 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide, lowering global temperatures by 0.6 degrees Celsius for 2 years, a single mountain cooling the world. At level 7, volcanoes remind us of scale. They don't just erase towns, they rewrite the climate ledger. They show us how thin our atmosphere really is, how fragile the sunlight we take for granted. The ground beneath your feet isn't solid. It's a pause in motion. Level 8. When one disaster summons another. Nature doesn't deal in isolation. It deals in chains. When one link breaks, the others start to shake. A flood weakens soil. A landslide blocks a river. The river bursts. A dam collapses. A city drowns. That's not 4 disasters. It's one changing shape with every hour. In 2011, Japan's Tohoku earthquake set off, a 15-meter tsunami that smashed through seawalls, knocked out backup generators, and triggered the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear meltdown. One geological event caused the world's worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. In 2023, wildfires in Canada grew so intense that they created their own weather systems, massive pyrocumulonimbus clouds that generated lightning storms, igniting new fires hundreds of kilometers away. Disaster feeding disaster. In Pakistan 2022, floodwaters submerged 1/3 of the nation's land area. The next domino wasn't just physical, it was digital. Power grids failed, telecommunication towers collapsed, ATMs went dark, digital payments froze. In an age where everything is connected, disaster no longer breaks systems. It breaks the connections between systems. At level 8, catastrophe becomes networked. The more advanced we are, the more fragile we become. Because resilience isn't built into our cities, it's assumed. A single storm can black out satellites. A single quake can silence data centers. The world runs on invisible infrastructure, and nature doesn't need to see it to destroy it. Disasters don't just break things anymore, they break what keeps things from breaking. Level 9. When the climate starts answering itself. At some point, the disaster stops being an event and becomes an environment. This is where climate change leaves the realm of theory and enters the world of recursion, a loop that feeds on its own outcomes. As Arctic ice melts, it exposes darker ocean water, which absorbs more sunlight, which melts more ice. This albedo effect speeds up warming exponentially. The thawing of permafrost releases 1,600 billion tons of carbon, double the amount humans have emitted since the Industrial Revolution. But worse, it releases methane, a greenhouse gas 80 times stronger than CO2 over 20 years. Each ton released traps more heat, melting more permafrost, a self-amplifying chain reaction. In Siberia, wildfires now burn 6 times more land than they did in the 1990s. In Greenland, the ice sheet loses 10 billion tons of ice daily. During peak melt season, oceans absorb 90% of this extra heat, expanding, acidifying, and breeding stronger cyclones. When those storms destroy mangroves, the coastal forests that used to trap carbon, the loop tightens again. The Earth system sensitivity threshold, scientists say, lies around plus 2 degrees Celsius of warming. Beyond it, ice sheets collapse, rain patterns shift, and one-in-a-century events happen every year. At level 9, disaster is no longer local. It's planetary metabolism. Every drought births a fire. Every fire births a storm. Every storm births displacement. Every refugee wave puts new strain on land and water. And the feedback continues. This level isn't cinematic, it's gradual. It's the kind of apocalypse you don't notice until the horizon changes color. When the planet reacts to itself, there's no off switch. Level 10. When scale breaks meaning, every few centuries nature resets the scale of possible. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami carried the energy of 10,000 atomic bombs. The 1815 Tambora eruption darkened skies across the globe. The 1931 China floods, the deadliest disaster in history, killed nearly 4 million people when the Yangtze River swallowed entire provinces. In 2023, Cyclone Freddy became the longest-lasting tropical cyclone on record, lasting 36 days, crossing the Indian Ocean twice, and killing over 1,400 people across Africa. At level 10, numbers stop being human. Disasters move from tragedy to statistics, and statistics are how empathy decays. Satellite images flatten suffering into pixels. Death tolls become headlines. The body count rises faster than comprehension. But every mega disaster carries one truth. Our world is smaller than we think. An eruption in Tonga can ripple through the ionosphere and shake GPS systems in Europe. A drought in Brazil can raise food prices in Cairo. A flood in Pakistan can destabilize energy markets in London. Disasters aren't local anymore. They're globalized pain. Every wave leaves an echo in someone else's sky. At level 10, the planet reminds us that we share one ecosystem, one engine, one equilibrium, and when that balance tips, the entire species shakes. Together. Level 11. When displacement becomes destiny, every disaster echoes in human lives, not for days, but for generations. Today, over 110 million people are displaced. More than 70% of them fled, not from war, but from the weather, floods, droughts, storms, the slow violence of climate. The World Bank projects that by 2050, 216 million people will become climate refugees, driven from homes swallowed by rising seas or scorched by heat. Bangladesh loses a football field of land every hour to erosion. The Marshall Islands may vanish entirely within decades. And in sub-Saharan Africa, droughts have already turned farmers into wanderers, crossing borders that water no longer respects. This level isn't just about displacement, it's about identity. When your hometown sinks, your citizenship does too. When your farm becomes desert, your economy collapses with it. Sociologists call this the secondary collapse, when infrastructure failure becomes social unraveling, power loss, water shortage, disease. crop failure, arrow migration, arrow conflict. At level 11, empathy becomes the first casualty. Borders tighten, politics harden, and fear becomes the currency of policy. Disaster no longer kills the body. It kills the idea of belonging. Humanity once migrated because it could. Now, it migrates because it must. Level 12. The planet reclaims rhythm. After every disaster, every flood, quake, and inferno, there comes a silence so vast it feels like peace. But it's not peace, it's recalibration. The planet has always moved through cycles: destruction, adaptation, rebirth. The end Permian extinction 252 million years ago erased 96% of marine life. The atmosphere turned toxic, the oceans boiled, and yet, within 10 million years, Earth bloomed again. Greener, more complex, more diverse. Even the Toba supereruption 74,000 years ago, which nearly wiped out early humans, became the crucible for innovation. From its ashes came migration, language, and resilience. At level 12, the planet resets. Oceans claim new borders. Mountains rise from ruins. Forests seed from ash. Life starts over with what survived. To Earth, disaster isn't tragedy, it's renewal. The carbon cycle stabilizes. Rivers find new routes. Ecosystems rebuild with patience that human time cannot measure. We call this recovery. Earth calls it remembering balance. At the final level, there are no villains, no warnings, no rescues, just rhythm. The same rhythm that started before us and will continue long after. Every natural disaster follows a pattern: build-up, breach, aftermath, rebirth. A pulse so ancient it predates life itself. We name them Katrina, Haiyan, Tambora, but Earth doesn't name what it repeats. To us, disaster feels like chaos. To Earth, it's choreography. We exist because the planet never truly rests. Volcanoes built our continents. Lightning created the first amino acids. Floods carved the valleys that hold our cities. Disaster didn't destroy life, it invented it. Earth is always rehearsing the next act. So when the wind changes and the ground trembles and the ocean exhales, don't think of it as the end. Think of it as the planet catching its breath. Because every natural disaster isn't Earth dying, it's Earth living loudly.